Everyone, and welcome to the Board of Multnomah County Commissioners Board Briefing. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually. For those presenting virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking, and when presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. Today's first briefing is an update from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office on body-worn cameras. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Vega Peterson and Board of County Commissioners. For the record, I'm Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell, Multnomah County Sheriff. And today I also have joining me Chief Deputy James Erickson, who oversees our law enforcement division, and Captain Doug Asbo, who oversees our patrol operations. As you remember, they were here to discuss this topic alongside of me earlier in the year. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today to provide an update on the body-worn camera project planning. Earlier this year, we discussed the various intricacies of developing policy related to viewing video footage, as well as the important topics of accountability and privacy. We are here today as a follow-up to that briefing. MCSO remains committed to the use of body-worn cameras, and I look forward to completing this important initiative. Next slide, please. It is our mission to support the lives of all community members through exemplary public safety service, and we envision a safe and thriving community for everyone. As I have spoken about before, body-worn cameras will support our foundation of building community trust, which is essential to effectively serving the size, complexity, and diversity of Multnomah County. This technology will provide deputies and community members with greater accountability and a better understanding of critical events of public concern. Also, the body-worn cameras will provide additional information to aid in fair and transparent adjudication of criminal and civil matters. I believe implementing a body-worn camera program can be highly effective, providing an unaltered audio and visual record of interactions as evidence in the event of a crime, a police community member interaction, or a use of force event. This technology will also provide additional transparency into the daily operations of our law enforcement division. Next slide, please. So our agenda today will include an update on our process to finalize our agency policy regarding the viewing of video and the law enforcement division's standard operating procedures relating to wearing body-worn cameras. We will share our experience conducting listening sessions over the summer months and the selection of our technology vendor for our pilot. With the selection being made, we are able to take the first steps in beginning a pilot program. The pilot will aid MCSO in evaluating the equipment functionality, future staffing needs, including ongoing costs and training, as well as system partnership steps before we move forward to an agency-wide project, division-wide project. Next slide, please. So before our body-worn camera program is to be implemented, MCSO engaged in our public policy process and community listening sessions. Our process to finalize a policy for viewing video resulted in a decision that allows members to view video prior to making statements and/or writing reports. The accuracy of reports, member statements, along with all other documentation is essential in any incident to receive and maintain the most accurate account of the events and to provide statements that are as complete and thorough as possible. Throughout our process, we researched several regional law enforcement agency policies to review and draft ideal language for our policy. We submitted our drafts to the public and the union for reviewing and gathering feedback, and we coordinated with the county attorney for compliance with Oregon revised statutes. Oregon law requires that policies and procedures include a requirement of the retention time of each recording, when the police officer must turn on their body-worn camera, a requirement of who owns the footage if using a third-party vendor, the prohibition of facial recognition, and the prohibition and the use of any recordings for non-legitimate law enforcement purposes. I will now turn the presentation over to Chief Deputy James Erickson to share information on the community listening sessions that our team conducted over the summer. And you're at your slide.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning. For the record, I'm James Erickson, the Law Enforcement Chief Deputy for the Sheriff's Office. I appreciate the chance to speak with you today to provide an update on our project related to adopting the use of body-worn cameras. At the request of Sheriff Morrissey O'Donnell, Captain Doug Asbo and I implemented listening sessions to gather input from our community. We understand the importance of meeting with our community and listening to their feedback on vital police-related issues. Community listening sessions is a dynamic opportunity to improve trust and transparency with those we serve. These meetings create community stability, officer safety, and effective police policies. During the listening sessions, MCSO was able to improve collective understanding of body-worn cameras. This understanding involved the various ways using body-worn cameras would improve policing in our community, to include improved evidence collection, strengthened deputy performance and accountability, enhanced agency transparency, to document encounters between the police and the public, and to investigate and resolve complaints. The format consisted of a 10-minute presentation of information with most of the allotted time reserved for questions and feedback. Next slide, please. MCSO presented the benefits of a body-worn camera program to the community groups. We also discussed the challenges presented with this program. The benefits discussed included accountability and transparency for both the Internal Affairs Unit and external agency request, improvement of public's perception of police used force by the deputies, and the importance of resolving community member complaints. The challenges presented to the community included accountability versus privacy, retention requirements, release of information, and when a deputy can review the footage, either before or after writing their police report. Captain Doug Asbo and I had the opportunity to present to many organizations within Multnomah County. These organizations included the Metro Business Association, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, the Somali American Council of Oregon, the Waterfront Organization of Oregon, the City of Maywood Park, the City of Wood Village, the City of Fairview, the Northeast Multnomah County Community Organization in Corbett, and the Public Safety Advisory Committees for the cities of Troutdale and Fairview. What did we learn from these listening sessions? There was unanimous support for the body-worn camera program. At every event, there was total support for having our deputies wear a body-worn camera, and no concerns were noted regarding whether a deputy can view footage from their camera prior to writing a police report. One city councilor noted, if they can't edit the video, then what's the problem with viewing before writing a report? Several other councilors from other contract cities inquired about the financial costs of this program and if the costs would be passed on to them. I wanted to pass along a comment from members of a community group who said they were excited about the Sheriff's Office considering the use of body-worn cameras. They detailed an event about a member of their community who had an experience with a different law enforcement agency who was wearing body-worn cameras. That footage captured by the police was evidence used to eliminate the community member from suspicion of a crime committed by a suspect with an extremely similar name. Based on the feedback received from the listening sessions, we have concluded that community members are aware of and eager for the benefits provided by using body-worn cameras. The process and policies that MCSO is proposing to address the potential challenges satisfied the community. Lastly, our contract cities are interested in a progress report on the pilot program during their monthly council meetings. I would now like to turn it over to Captain Doug Asbo to discuss the technology of the body-worn camera program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Honorable Chair, members of the board. For the record, I am Captain Doug Asbo. I manage law enforcement patrol operations for the Sheriff's Office. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak with you about body-worn cameras today. I'd like to begin with an update on technology. As we move toward the pilot phase of the program, we have selected GTAC as the technology vendor. A number of factors went into this decision, including independent input from other agencies, our existing relationship with this vendor, and this vendor's interoperability with much of our existing technology. To that point, we are putting the finishing touches on one of the biggest technology hurdles, which is our DIMS, or Digital Image Management System. This system will allow for collection and storage of all forms of digital evidence, including but not limited to our body-worn camera video, interview room video, cell phone video, digital photos, as well as digital evidence provided or captured by external sources. The DIMS system is critical not only in the proper collection and storage of data, but in allowing the needed access to our investigative and prosecutorial partners. Next slide, please. As we move into the pilot program will focus on three factors. We want to ensure that the equipment is durable, effective, and meets the needs of MCSO and the communities we serve. We want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the staffing needs required to have an efficient and effective long-term program, and we want to appropriately address any unanticipated concerns that arise. We will be piloting a minimum of 5 cameras and plan to rotate these cameras throughout the law enforcement division to ensure that we have input from a broad base of our membership. We are currently on track to begin that pilot program the first week of January in 2024. Next slide, please. As we review the timeline that we provided to the board at our previous presentation, we still anticipate a review of the pilot in early spring and would look to make any potential budget request to the board for fiscal year 2025 budget. Thank you for your time. I will now turn it back over to the sheriff. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much for that detailed context. Moving forward, I will ensure our continued partnership with our local law enforcement agencies and others to identify the impacts in situations with the DA's office and with our defense teams, as well as finalizing a funding estimate for a full-scale model. We look forward to providing a briefing to share our experience and the learning that we gleaned from the pilot program and any additional next steps. We anticipate in the spring of 2024 reviewing the pilot program and, if appropriate, making a request for funding for fiscal year 2025. This concludes our update for today. We greatly appreciate your time, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for the briefing and the update on this. I know that you also reached out to District 2 and District 3 offices with some of the video from the last briefing and some of the follow-up materials, so I appreciate that outreach that you did for them. I will see if we have any questions or comments, and we will go ahead and start with Commissioner Myron.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the for this report. I just had a couple of questions, if I can find them on my notes. I'm curious about how the locations and groups were selected for the listening sessions, and whether there was representation from behavioral health service providers, behavioral health, like consumers of behavioral health services in any of those, because I understand there may be increased impact of having like the cameras in relation to individuals experiencing mental health challenges.
I appreciate that question. The majority of the groups that we presented to were groups that we had started building robust partnerships with, that recognized that we wanted to ensure that we were continuing to build community trust and maintain that trust with our communities. Also looking at the areas that Multnomah County Sheriff's Office serves and working with our contract city partners and presenting in multiple venues as well. And then I will pass it over to either the chief deputy or the captain as they presented on each and every one of those listening sessions, if there's anything else to add.
I'd just add that during these presentations, we also, one of the questions that we asked was for whoever we were giving that presentation to provide us with any other groups that they thought might benefit from having that presentation given. So we did receive some presentation suggestions from the groups and reached out to those groups as well.
That's great. I was curious about planning. I mean, and this is probably outside this conversation right now, but just to follow up on maybe the this equipment and all of the ancillary services associated with it is extremely expensive and will continue to increase in expense. And I'm wondering if there are projections for the future about some of that, like even, you know, the costs of storage or the costs of managing, what those will be predicted out for the future.
Yeah, we've been working with our IT as well as our business services manager to identify what that would look like. For our pilot project, we are able to utilize equipment from the vendor to allow us an opportunity to determine if this is the right opportunity for us. And storage is covered through, we already have interview rooms and we're already utilizing that technology, that same resource. So that will be covered for the pilot as well. However, yes, there is a cost to if we were going to roll out to the entire division, and we will make sure that we provide that to you. Right now, using some of the existing resources with respect to public records requests and polling video, we're using people that are already doing some of that work in collaboration to ensure that we're able to move our pilot forward and get the best opportunity for evaluation and recognizing any concerns, challenges, successes that we can come back and share with you.
That's great. And the last question is just, and I apologize if I missed this, but the sort of the intersection with the DA's office around costs and services being provided, because I know that that's been a big issue as well. How do these things intersect?
Yeah, I had a preliminary meeting, as well as there was a session that'll have Captain Asbo fill in as well, recognizing that we may not all be using the same technology in Multnomah County and some of the challenges that may present, but also making sure that we're utilizing the technology that meets the best needs of each of our organizations. So there is awareness of that we are moving forward with the pilot, and then I think but further, as you discuss the budgetary impacts of recognizing what will the impact be to our system partners as well, that is at the top of our mind, and we will continue having those discussions. And there was a listening session with the DA's office as well.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to this continuing to unfold.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Beeson.
Good morning, and Sheriff, I know we haven't had a chance to have our one-on-one, but it's nice to see you.
You
and
too.
I appreciate all of the tremendous amount of work that you all have done over these many months in crafting this policy. I did have a chance to go back and watch the work session and appreciated all the background materials that I got. A few questions. It seemed like I'm assuming you shared all the listening session partners in your conversations or in your presentation today. I'm wondering, and besides the Somali Association, were there other communities who have historically had a certain deeper level of mistrust with law enforcement or different experiences that had specific listening sessions, or were the rest of them all sort of jurisdictional partner-led sessions?
We did reach out to them to request a listening session, and for one reason or another, either they weren't interested or because maybe they're more concerned about Portland because most of their community lives in Portland versus East County, but we can provide a list of those that we did reach out to if you would like.
I would. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I also want to recognize that it's a controversial topic sometimes, and that the opportunity to deepen accountability and trust through body-worn cameras is something I definitely support. I am curious, I know that the vast majority of jurisdictions are allowing review first before reports in use of force, and that Portland has gone a different direction as of late. I'm wondering how, if at all, that sort of direction came up in your research and insights, and sort of how you all landed on sort of continuing with the general status quo instead of sort of where the city and other jurisdictions are slowly starting to move.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Throughout this process, we had work groups that were identifying research materials and looking across our region and the nation with respect to what is the prevailing practice. And so going through all of that research, the majority of the information that was presented was with respect to being able to provide the most accurate, the most detailed picture of the events that unfolded if reviewing video prior to making statements or writing reports, similar to if a deputy is writing notes on a call to refresh their memory as they're writing the report. It's like it is the visual piece of that, and being able to provide the most complete picture at that first report writing or interview.
And so did the idea of pre-review or not after use of force come up in conversations as a potential path to explore, or was that sort of a not on the table for exploration?
No, we explored that even after or during our briefing in February. We talked about moving forward into community listening sessions because policies in the city had not been finalized yet. And so we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from our community members as well in making that finalized decision. We had our starting point, but we wanted to do this additional outreach prior to making that decision.
Okay. Understood. And I let your chief of staff know that I do support the DOJ Civil Rights Division recommendation that at least after use of force that there not be pre-review. But I also recognize that that's not our role here on the board. But I like that direction that law enforcement is starting to go, and maybe it's in our future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Berm-Edwards.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here and sharing the update. I'm appreciative to get it at this sort of milestone of where you are right now. Supportive of the pilot program and the use of body-worn cameras. The question I would have, just given the multiple jurisdictions in Multnomah County, so in addition to obviously Multnomah County's law enforcement arm, there's multiple other jurisdictions, and I'm interested in knowing about the amount of alignment that you think will have once the sort of you move from pilot to implementation, just in terms of policies and practices, and like how that will work, just in terms of they'll be consistent. Mm-hmm. Will there be a level of consistency across the county, or will it be more of a patchwork of policies and practices?
Yeah, great question. We are in alignment with other partners in Multnomah County, but that also goes to other policies and practices that we have that We are in alignment, but there's additional steps that, for instance, potentially Portland Police might need to do in an investigation of a use of force incident than Multnomah County Sheriffs have to do. So we run into this when we're working with TriMet Transit Police, when we were collaborative with multiple agencies there, recognizing that each agency is bound by their own policies and procedures, and understanding that our supervisors need to recognize that. So I think as this unfolds and we complete our pilot project, and as if the city is able to move theirs forward as well, I don't think it will be a lift for us to be in alignment, because we've collaborated and worked together, and even more recently. And so I think having that open communication across our jurisdictions and across our partner organizations, that we're able to work out any issues that may arise. And that, again, I think will help with the pilot project in learning where there's deficiencies, challenges, and where we see great successes.
Great. And then this is a somewhat related question is, so those multiple law enforcement agencies will be all working with the DA's office, just given they're the central point, and I'm interested to know what sort of conversations have happened or discussions about how, if you have different agencies with somewhat, hopefully aligned policies and practice coming into the DA's office, whether there is going to be sort of a coordinated approach or type of engagement with the DA's office, given that they'll be retaining and obviously using it as evidence in some instances.
Absolutely. We will continue our coordinated and collaborative approach. We recognize that this is a big lift. This requires a lot of personnel and a funding resource to implement a program such as body-worn cameras. And we want all of our partners to be we want this to be a successful program. And so we have to make sure that we're including our partners in each step of the process. So we will absolutely continue to do that.
And I would also add to that that one of the big things that we looked at was, and one of the challenges I think for the DA's office is how do they get that information that they need from us to them. And so as we evaluated the vendor that we were using and looked at our digital image management software, that is the software that we are going to be using for all our digital images or digital evidence. So we were able to dovetail body-worn cameras into that existing system to hopefully help simplify access. And I think it will actually be even give them better access than they have previously had to those things.
And then the last question I have is more of just the mechanics. So you mentioned that there would be 5 cameras. What does that look like in a pilot deployed? Is it a certain subset of officers, or just how does that look? Because that number surprised me. It just seemed low, but maybe there's the way it's deployed. It actually has a broader.
Yeah, just looking at the activities of the Sheriff's Office, there are multiple areas that job duties that we perform. So looking at ensuring that our patrol operations has the opportunity to go through this process, but also our civil unit, our civil deputies, TriMet, and then also looking at River Patrol. So we wanted to capture the varying work assignments as well, and we'll deploy 5 at a time. Some may in smaller units be 2 in one unit and 3 in the other. But we also need to make it manageable for us to be able to collect information and understand if this is the best path for us with this specific technology, and again, any challenges that may arise.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for being here, and thank you, Chief Deputy Erickson and Captain Asbo, just because you're here. Thank you so much for the commitment and support that you all have given to East County. I know that you work very closely with our contract cities around homelessness and public safety in any way, it's just really so important to have those relationships with East County, and I'm just really appreciative. So I wanted to call that out while you're here today.
Thank you.
I do have some questions, and I'm wondering, so you had talked about in the presentation about like who owns the footage, the prohibition around facial recognition, and like when they turn on, when, you know, so I'm just kind of like curious about the details. Like maybe we could start off like, so they have to manually be turned on and off versus automatically, is that right?
Correct. With this technology vendor, yes.
Okay. And so I'm assuming like you're working, or can you talk about like when does an officer turn it on, turn it off, roughly? What's the thinking?
Yeah, so recording continuously, beginning when the deputy believes there is a crime or violation that has occurred and or is occurring in real time when they make the contact with an individual. And this could include traffic stops, could include responding to calls for service, self-initiated activity where they would be calling into BOAC to let them know that they're conducting self-initiated, whether that's a contact with an individual. And then built into that procedure, there are also sensitive times where we want to respect dignity and respect of a potential victim of a crime, and we want to make sure that there's room in our procedure that the deputy can deactivate, but make that clear on why that situation is occurring on record in their reports and on the body-worn camera.
Thank you, Sheriff. So would you characterize that most of our deputies welcome body-worn cameras?
Absolutely. In our presentation in February, even when I was leading the law enforcement division in 2019 and 2020, and part of 21, that was many deputies, sergeants were coming up and saying they really want to move forward with this technology because they were seeing the benefits, and they were seeing that it was going to be a good tool for our members and a good resource.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And so you had mentioned, so who does own the footage?
The sheriff's office.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about the prohibition around facial recognition?
Just that per ORS statute, we cannot utilize any facial recognition technology with the body-worn cameras. And that's based on a statute. And we can provide you additional information.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we can have an offline. Yeah, the weeds, I'm just trying to understand, like, okay, so if you have a video of somebody, then you're like 100% able to identify them, and is that different than facial recognition? Is there a difference between those two things?
Yes, there is a difference. Just as if an example of utilizing a camera from a business of someone that potentially committed a crime and putting that information out to locate that potential person, that potential suspect, versus having some technology that can recognize and identify a person.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else to add there?
Yeah, if I could, I wanted to add a couple things. You kind of brought up what we call triggers, or having the deputy turn on the camera themselves versus being automatically turned on. And through the pilot process, we are going to look at some options for the camera to be automatically turned on. So as an example, if the deputies to turn on their overhead lights in their car, that may be a trigger that automatically turns on the camera. If they are to draw their duty weapon or taser, those are all potentials, and we're just going to look at how effective they are. And because we do want to, we want to limit, partly take away that responsibility from deputies to have to remember to turn on the cameras, and also make sure that we're capturing those things and we aren't basing that on just memory and recollection to turn on that camera in a critical event. So as we look at those, we'll find out how effective they are and be able to better report on which one of those we're using. Also, I wanted to add that when we developed our SOP on this, it was based on the statute, which is RS 133741, and that statute lays out some pretty specific guidelines as to what our policy or our SOP should include. So we made sure that our SOP was compliant with that statute, and that's a lot of what covers the facial recognition software and some of those other things that you brought up. So most of those are directed by statute, and then our policy is compliant with that statute.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate you expanding. I think about it like how many of us, I'm like, did I turn the garage, did I shut the garage door? And like every time I turn around, I go back, I did. But you know, so just like automatically, you know, things just become so embedded and we don't remember actually doing it. So I appreciate you bringing that up and finding a way to have it be perhaps more automated if that's what the data would indicate would be a best practice. And then I thought the other thing too was really, which we really haven't talked a lot about, but somebody brought up, was just the perception. Can you talk a little bit about what you've heard or what you think will happen around the perception, either from law enforcement or from the public, by having body-worn cameras?
Well, I think some of the areas we talked about in our last briefing as well, and just as we're looking at accountability, community trust, strengthening that within our community, being able to have a record of what occurred in a specific incident, being able to potentially share information earlier on than we would be able to in a situation that public has grave concern about, to help continue to build those bridges and recognize essentially how we can continue to build trust through that process, and looking at resolving incidents with respect to deputy and community interaction. We would have a record of that situation and be able to navigate that more than just a written report. We'll be able to use this footage also for training purposes. So if we have situations where we think our members need additional training, that we can utilize this as an opportunity to provide additional training in certain situations that will give people, again, a visual instead of just talking through an incident. And then, you know, when I talked a little bit about handwritten notes, and it will really give that complete picture with statements and video as well as written reports. This isn't a replacement for all of the other pieces of evidence that go into any type of situation, but it is enhancing that information and being able to provide more information in each and every incident and encounter that we have.
Great, thank you, Sheriff. What about and maybe you're looking at this, but I'm thinking about the timeliness of the release of the video.
And that was kind of what I was thinking about as well, is when you have an incident of public concern and you're able to work with our DA's office and our system partners on releasing so there's more information to lessen a concern or make sure that we have an opportunity for quick accountability. That is, accountability is key for me, and having that option on both sides of being able to address an issue in more of an immediate, when you have video that is detailing out a specific incident. So it's not just, there's several areas I would say that this will be extremely beneficial from an accountability side, from the Sheriff's Office, as well as building trust and providing information to community.
Great. Just two more quick questions. What system does Gresham use? Is it different than the one that you were looking at?
Currently use Motorola, but they're not going to continue with that vendor. So they're looking at a system that I think Portland's going to, Axon.
Okay. Okay. Is that going to be problematic if everybody has a different vendor, or not so much?
So that, of course, was one of the things that we evaluated. And I think with our vendor and our existing digital image management system, that it's really going to simplify access to our prosecutorial partners.
Okay, and then last question. I know we had set aside money to run the pilot, so I presume there's enough there to run the pilot. Do we have any idea what the and you can get back to me, what the overall costs will be yet? And maybe it's too soon.
Yeah, we'll be able to provide that to you. We've been working through that. I wanted to make sure that we were able to move this pilot forward. And again, IT and our fiscal unit are working through that now, and we can share what we have.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being here. It sounds like there's broad community support, as well as that law enforcement looks forward to this as well. So it sounds to me like a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming back to give us an updated briefing on this. I really appreciate all the community outreach that has gone in, the deep conversations you've had internally about what this could look like, and then working with the partners to see how this work is going to take place in kind of a complex environment where we do have other jurisdictions that are moving forward with other law enforcement agencies that are moving forward with this, and how they can best work together. I feel like this is very much still in the pilot stage, so look forward to having further conversations as we're planning for the next fiscal year, but also seeing how the system actually works when we've got multiple jurisdictions all feeding up to the district attorney's office, and how we can really use these. But I know this is something that you've been working on for, I think I remember talking about it in like the 2022 budget, for the 23 budget cycle. So this is something that's been a long time coming. But I do think it can be make a big difference, in terms of transparency and clarity in what's happening. And it was great to hear that the folks in MCSO are looking forward and engaged in this as well. So appreciate all of this, and thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so our next board briefing that we're going to is the library audit presentation. We have the auditor here today. All of us recognize that we have a world-class library system here in Multnomah County. It's really one of the jewels for our county. And it has helped make this county, I think, full of active, engaged readers and learners that we are, and will continue to be for generations to come. But we also know, I remember going to the library, riding my bike to the library in my small town, and, finding the book and how important and wonderful that was. But libraries of today are so much more than that, right? They're really hubs where people can go and get information. They can have community connections, family connections. There's where people access technology. And with all of the complexities of that, with all the changing roles of the library, we need to continue to make sure that these are safe spaces, that these are enriching spaces for everyone there, and that's a lot. And we also are in a really big transition period with our library system here in Multnomah County because of the investment that voters have made with the Library Capital Bond Project and all of the massive work that is taking place as we speak to really reinvest and rebuild and expand our library system. So I really want to thank the auditor and her team for undertaking this library performance audit. We know that libraries are really crucial parts of our social fabric for healthy connections that we make with our communities. They provide resources across the board for folks, and making sure that they have the resources they need, not just in terms of books and technology, but the investments and the resources they need to be well functioning, and that our employees have the support and resources that they need to be able to do their important role in the community is hugely important. So I appreciate the chance to go through this audit. I had the chance to review it and respond to it, working in partnership with Serena and Bailey and her team, and really welcome the opportunity to acknowledge it, reflect on it, learn more about it, and share this with the board and with the public in this setting. So thank you also for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, my name is Nicole DeWeese. I'm an audit director for the Multnomah County Auditor's Office, and I use she, her pronouns. One thing of note of this audit is typically Auditor McGuirk would supervise it. She has a spouse who is an on-call employee at the library, so she was not involved in this audit in any way, and instead I supervised it. And so now I'd like to pass it off to Mikal and Caroline, who were the staff on this audit.
Thank you, Nicole. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Caroline Zawitkowski. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an audit director with the Multnomah County Auditor. I'm excited to be presenting with my colleague Mikal today on an audit titled Multnomah County Library Employees Raise Serious Concerns with Security, Workforce Equity, and Staffing. Next slide, please. Our library audit focused on the employee work environment. Our audit had two objectives, one focused on safety and security, and another focused on staffing and workforce equity. We started this audit because results from employee surveys conducted before the audit showed a decrease in satisfaction among library employees. Libraries also experienced some high-profile security incidents. Additionally, it had been almost 20 years since our office had audited the library, so it was due for an audit. The library work environment directly relates to how services are provided. When we were interviewing employees early in the audit process, people told us that in many ways, employees are the service, especially when looking at programs and connecting with diverse communities. As one employee told us, books can't move themselves and story times don't tell themselves. So from a service perspective, it is important to look at the work environment. The library is also undergoing a lot of changes, which makes this a good time to address workforce challenges. For our presentation today, I will start by setting some context. Then I'll pass the presentation to Mikal to talk about the work we did and our findings and recommendations for our first objective, looking at security. And then I will finish the presentation talking about our findings and recommendations for our second objective, looking at staffing and workforce equity. Next slide, please. We want to thank library management and staff for all the time they spent participating in the audit process. I have personally never had so much interest and engagement in an audit before. We also want to acknowledge that library workers, like other county employees, worked through the pandemic, the racial reckoning of the George Floyd protests, and the challenges present when returning to in-person services. We also want to acknowledge that there have been traumatic workplace violence incidents, in addition to other stressors people have experienced. Given that, we are especially thankful for people's willingness to share their stories with us. Next slide. Before we get into our findings, we want to set some context. The library has faced significant changes in the last few years. During the pandemic, public locations reduced services for over a year, not allowing patrons to enter buildings. The library also underwent a staffing reorganization around that time. The reorganization grouped neighborhood libraries into regions and placed a greater focus on centralizing community engagement and programs based in the community. Additionally, trust was broken between management and staff when potential layoffs were communicated during the pandemic. After reopening, housing and behavioral health crises that were already in our community were amplified, which affects public spaces like libraries. And finally, as if that wasn't enough change, a bond measure passed in 2020 for major construction to libraries, including renovations and building new buildings, as this picture shows, with Central Library being surrounded by a fence during construction. Currently, 7 neighborhood libraries are closed for construction with more planned. This is a pivotal moment. In 2 or 3 years, all the buildings will be reopened. It is important to note that a lot of our work took place after reopening from the pandemic and before closing for construction, though we also did some work during the construction closures. And I will now pass it to Mikal.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. For the record, my name is Mikal Johannes, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a management auditor in the Multnomah County Auditor's Office. I will be sharing about some of the work we've done throughout this audit. We began by conducting background research, including reviewing program documents, best practices, and laws. We also interviewed library employees and management. To gather additional perspectives, we conducted an employee survey. We also held site visits at neighborhood libraries. Pictured here is Rockwood Library, one of the locations we visited. Finally, we analyzed data, including workforce and security incident data. I will be sharing about our first objective, safety and security. Yes, next slide. Thank you. After I share our security findings and recommendations, I will pass it to Caroline to share our findings and recommendations about staffing and workforce equity. In this photo is Midland Library, another library location we visited. Next slide. We found that staff face serious security risks in the workplace. In 2022, there were more than 2,000 incident reports submitted at Multnomah County Library locations. Incident reports are used to document minor and serious incidents. Serious incidents may involve violence or threats of physical harm. A few examples of serious incidents include patrons carrying weapons, incidents involving sexual harassment, and employees responding to drug use and overdoses. In interviews, staff also described the traumatic impact of responding to serious security incidents. Next slide. We found that library employees that work with the public need more support to maintain a welcoming environment for everyone who interacts with the library system. The library and the county have taken steps to address security concerns. We identified areas that can strengthen the library's security incident response. This includes improving the post-incident response to better support employees after security incidents. In addition, the library should collect and analyze trends in security data across the library system. In the course of the audit, we also became concerned that the library was at risk of not meeting OSHA requirements for safety committees. We sent out a letter to management at the time so that it could be addressed before waiting for the audit to conclude. Next slide. Other topics such as staffing, workforce equity, and communication also impact the safety and security response. This is mentioned in our report when we discuss those topics. I will focus on some of the intersections between the security response, staffing and workforce equity, and providing trauma-informed internal communication. For example, staff reported feeling less safe due to lower staffing levels in neighborhood libraries. We also heard about a desire among staff for improved internal communication as part of the post-incident response to security incidents. And Caroline will be talking about these topics in more detail. Next slide. We found that the library does not currently analyze systemic trends in security incident data. This is in part due to limitations of the current system. Under the current system, it can be challenging to track the type of incidents and the severity of the incidents. However, these are important factors for making data-driven decisions about security needs across the library system. Next slide. Finally, we found that the library may not have been complying with Oregon OSHA rules about safety committees. We sent a letter to library leaders and the Board of Commissioners to share our concerns. Oregon OSHA requires many employers to maintain active safety committees. Safety committees provide employees and managers opportunities to discuss and proactively address safety concerns. The library has taken many steps to address these concerns. Since our communication, the library has implemented corrective actions and has shared their plans to fully meet OSHA's requirements for ensuring that safety committees have enough members and meet the training and documentation requirements. We want to thank them for their work and communication on this topic. Some of the corrective actions happened while we were finalizing the audit, and so some of our follow-up work will include evaluating some of the steps that have been taken to prevent this risk in the future. Next slide. Thank you. Our report includes 10 recommendations. Our recommendations related to security are summarized here. Some of our more immediate security recommendations include ensuring that safety committees are meeting OSHA standards and coordinating with the county security program to complete a workplace violence prevention plan. Next slide. Our other recommendations related to security include creating a plan for continuous evaluation of the safety and security program, revising post-incident protocols to provide more detail, particularly around supporting staff and debriefing, and communicating summaries of incidents and trends. And now I will pass it to Caroline to share about our other findings and recommendations.
Thank you, Mikal. Next slide, please. I will now talk about staffing and workforce equity, including the effects on services. This photo shows a colorful book display during an event at the St. John's Library in 2017. Next slide. During the period we were looking at, services were reduced. Neighborhood libraries had to close multiple times due to staffing. They either closed completely or opened only to door service, which is where patrons can pick up books at the door but not enter the building. There were 44 days with some sort of closure in the first 6 months of 2022, and closures have continued since then at a slower pace. Additionally, the number of programs offered by the library reduced significantly during and after the pandemic and were slow to ramp back up. Next slide. One contributing factor is that neighborhood libraries have less staff than in the past. This graph shows that both budgeted and actual FTE, or full-time equivalent staff, was reduced at neighborhood libraries. The FTE levels in other areas of the library were either flat or increased. The other areas on this graph are materials, which includes managing and moving the book collection and administration, as well as community services, which provides services to the community and includes adult and youth learning, teams, and answering questions through phones or chat. Most of the reduction in FTE in neighborhood libraries was in the clerk position, which is being phased out. Some of the shift in staffing is also related to the staffing reorganization, with its focus on centralizing community engagement under the community services team. The library also has fewer on-call and floating staff than in the past. Other contributing factors for the reduced services mentioned on the previous slide are the pandemic disruptions, including absences related to COVID. And finally, library leaders also changed the guidelines for the minimum number of staff required to keep a building open. These guidelines include a minimum number of staff acting as the person in charge who is responsible for responding to disruptions, including security incidents. So they raised the number of minimum staff required for security reasons. While pressures on staffing have been reduced after construction closures started, since staff were available for reassignments, a lack of employees available to work as the person in charge has continued to lead to closures. Next slide, please. We also looked at workforce concerns related to workforce equity and the work of the library's employees with cultural and language skills. The library has a robust program of staff who use specific cultural and language skills in their jobs. In county terminology, these positions have cultural and language KSAs, or knowledge, skills, and abilities. This table shows the approximate number of filled positions with cultural and language skills for different communities. There are over 50 positions serving Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish-speaking communities, over 35 positions serving Black or African American communities, around 15 positions serving Chinese communities, and under 10 positions each serving Slavic or Russian-speaking communities, Vietnamese communities, Indigenous communities, and Somali communities. The library workforce has diversified in recent years, and many of the new BIPOC employees hired also use cultural and language skills in their positions. Next slide, please. We found that greater clarity could be provided for employees using cultural and language skills in their roles. As part of the staffing reorganization, the library has shifted toward greater centralized direction for community engagement. With this shift, more guidance and clarity could be provided to employees with cultural and language skills based in libraries, especially related to expectation for working in the community. With balancing work between their library duties and community-focused work, some employees felt overworked or undervalued for their expertise, especially if they were unable to do much work in the community as they would like due to staffing or unclear role expectations. In an employee survey we conducted, we found that employees with cultural and language skills reported less role clarity than employees without language and cultural skills. In that same survey, library assistants with cultural and language skills reported higher workloads than library assistants without cultural and language skills. Library assistant is the most common position to require specific cultural and language skills. Next slide, please. As the library is in this pivotal moment, it is critical that leaders address workforce challenges in their planning for staffing libraries when they reopen from construction. Morale is an issue at the library, and some of that stems from decisions in the past, but some of that also stems from the current challenges that we discussed today around security, workforce equity, and staffing. Better addressing these issues could improve the work environment, staff morale, and the services the library provides. We also note that there's an opportunity to improve internal communication to help rebuild trust. Library leadership does communicate extensively, however, could be more consistent, including consistently explaining why decisions are made. Employees also reported some frustration with feeling not listened to, even when there were opportunities for staff involvement. Next slide, please. As Mikal mentioned, our report has 10 recommendations. She already went over the 5 recommendations related to security, so now I will talk about the remaining 5 recommendations related to staffing and workforce equity. The recommendations are summarized and have more detail in the report. We recommend communicating the vision for outreach and engagement to all staff, identifying upcoming changes and implementing communication strategies for them, and developing and communicating a plan for library leadership to regularly spend time on site in neighborhood libraries. Next slide, please. Finally, we also recommend that leaders address the findings in this report in their planning to staff libraries after all construction is complete. To increase transparency, we also recommend presenting their staffing plan to the Board of County Commissioners, which is also the Library District Board. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much, and we are happy to answer any questions about the audit.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this, Nicole, Caroline, and Mikal, for the work and the report that has come out. We'll go to the board for questions and comments, and we'll start with Commissioner Beeson.
Thank you very much for this thorough audit. I had many of my questions answered during our briefing, so I generally want to understand how we are compare and are situated to other library systems in urban areas as we face some of these issues, and to understand where we are facing unique challenges and also when we are facing challenges similar to other cities. So I appreciate having that question answered and for you all doing that research to get to that. So thank you.
And I should have mentioned, if you have questions for the audit staff that's here today, please do that. And then we can also have an opportunity if you have questions for some of the folks from the library. We have several folks from the library here. So after we go through the audit committee, if you have additional questions for them, we can invite them to come up. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Broome-Edwards.
Thank you. Appreciate the audit and the deeper dive into this topic. As I've been out visiting different neighborhood libraries, many of the things that were highlighted in the audit were things that library staff raised as concerns they had, or just topics that were on their minds, and really things that they were interested in having addressed, specifically some of the trends that came post-pandemic. So I appreciate the sort of analytical look and the survey that you did across the library system to talk to employees and hear about the concerns. One of the things, and again, this parallels things that I heard from visits to neighborhood libraries, is just all the incidents that were happening, and just highlighted that in 2022, the 2,000 incidents, and then the survey where 43% of library employees who interacted with the public didn't feel safe at work, which is almost half of our employees, which is really concerning. Or that if they had an incident where law enforcement was called, that a response rarely arrived while the incident was still occurring. And so I was interested in your recommendations, and am interested in the sort of the timing of the recommendations, which cover both training and planning and looking at trends, but also then have some pretty specific staffing recommendations. And you can tell me whether this is, Chair, whether this is a question for library staff or the auditors, but I'm curious about the timing with the October 2024 due date and just that being in the future. And I realize we have some of our branches closed because of the renovations, but I'm interested in things that are happening now that might address that, given that this has been ongoing for several years, and so curious about whether their steps are being taken now or whether it is going to be a response after some of the branches open, or the neighborhood libraries.
So the response letter did have report outs to all the different recommendations, and some are ongoing, some are planned, some have already, happened. We'll invite the library staff up after to answer that question. I think they'd be best able to answer it.
So that's one question, and then this is, I think, a future question for the commission, but based on the recommendations, is that based on also the data and the feedback from library staff about just the increase in incidents as libraries are public spaces and the increased sort of behavioral health needs and the identification by library staff, the need for both social work or crisis response, individuals with crisis response backgrounds to support library staff, is that, in some ways, libraries became de facto day centers, or when we had weather emergencies, individuals were directed like a place where they could go to be safe or cool, or warm or cooler, would be libraries. And I'm thinking about in our upcoming budget whether we've already made some significant investments in day centers, which would provide more specific services versus having the libraries be the place that it happens. And I'm interested in the thinking coming out of the audit, whether we're looking at increased investments in day centers versus the libraries, or continuing to look at the libraries as part of that network.
Yeah, I think in terms of the libraries, one of the things I know, even before the pandemic, there was the realization that libraries really serve as places for people to go who may not have a lot of other options, and there was a movement to embed different providers in certain library spaces. That really went away during the pandemic. So I think that is something that we can definitely look at, continuing to have those investments, and I think Bailey and the team can talk a little bit more about those specific ones. I think we have to recognize it's a both and, right? We need to have, investments in day shelters and folks for people to go, and people are always going to be able to access the libraries because they're public spaces to the extent that they are, following the rules and the protocols of the library and acting in a safe way. So I think it's holding space for both, recognizing what the roles of the libraries are, but also that we have to be doing more than just relying on libraries.
Great, I really appreciate that, and the commission's investment in day centers, because I do believe if those day centers have the supports that are needed, that it can be a both and. So individuals who want to use the library services have access to the library services, but also that if it's more of a general, they need a place that's warm or cool, or a variety of other services, that the place to get that would be hopefully other county supported services versus our libraries. So I hope we continue those investments, and I will be interested in hearing from the libraries when it's ready. But I really appreciate you just elevating the issues, which I have heard from many library employees that they're concerned about, and I think the audit really gives us a chance to think about how we better support library employees on a whole host of issues, and support the public who uses the libraries. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Nicole and Mikal and Caroline. You gave me a really great briefing, and I did ask a lot of my questions, but I do have a couple more. And Caroline, thank you so much for sending that information. The question that I had posed to Caroline is about morale and then correlating it to like our employee surveys as well as ethical culture surveys. So Caroline, I'm wondering if I was just trying to figure out, are we on a better trajectory, and then kind of looking at past employee surveys. And so maybe if you could just kind of share what you shared with me.
I'm happy to. And I think we'll have a much better idea after the 2023 employee survey is ready. But as I mentioned, part of the reason that we did this audit in the first place was based on some of the responses from surveys. So our office did a survey in 2020 that was looking at employee experiences during the pandemic, and we borrowed a few questions from the employee survey and saw a very significant decrease in satisfaction. When you look at those few specific questions, so we didn't look at the whole big picture, it did look like there was maybe a slight increase in 2021. So 2020 being a particularly low point in satisfaction, but the increase in 2021 was still a downward trajectory from the past. So still looking at the trends in employee survey overall have continued to decrease for library employee satisfaction, which is why looking at 2023 will provide a good information point. I also looked at the ethical culture survey from 2022, so again, some more recent information. And while that doesn't look explicitly at employee satisfaction, can give perspective on the overall work climate. And there were some questions that library employees had a particularly high level of disagreement to those responses, so a little bit more negative than some of the other departments in the county. So that's just another data point. I don't think it's, so in summary, it looks like there has, satisfaction is lower than it used to be. And when we get those results from 2023, I think that will provide more information.
Thank you for looking at that data. I mean, and we all know that there are reasons why a pandemic, and then as you have pointed out, while we're incredibly excited about the library bond, I mean, that has created just a lot of change inherently. So there are reasons why in trying to figure out the causation, and I guess I'm wondering too, I mean, I am very concerned about, if my math is right, 2,000 incidents in 2022. That means that there's 5 incidents a day. So I'll be really curious to look at the 2023 numbers. Probably, I would assume, not going to go down. But the fact that we're looking at this, and so I am kind of curious about, so one of your recommendations was about post-incident support. Can you maybe expand a little bit, like what exactly that entails?
Yeah, I can start to answer that. So I do want to clarify that the 2,000 incident reports, that there are some, it doesn't equal the number of incidents. So there are times when for a specific incident, maybe there's more than one employee that fills out an incident report to get additional perspectives on that incident. And other reasons that there would be more than one incident report for one incident. So I hope and we do clarify that in the report. And then to the question about what kind of post-incident support, some things included communication about incidents across the library system, and providing spaces for staff to debrief after incidents, and then revising some of the incident response protocols to keep them updated to what staff are currently experiencing.
Great. Thank you for pointing out that there could be multiple. I'll have to go back and look at the report, but I think it would be interesting to be, to look at. I don't know how many reports are made per incident, but so it's not quite as high. So I appreciate that, Mikal. And I'm wondering. So you had also mentioned that the clerk position is being phased out, and I don't know if I kind of alluded that maybe that is creating to less staffing. So am I correct or incorrect in that interpretation?
Overall, if you add all the positions together, the FTE has decreased. And part of that is, but then if you look at, position by position, the ones that have had the most decrease are that clerk position, because when someone leaves, if a new person is hired, they're hired as a library assistant, or they're hired as an access service assistant, which are other positions that shared some overlap with clerks. So in total, there is a lower amount of FTE, but it doesn't mean there's fewer library assistants, but there are fewer clerks. That's where that has been coming out of.
Okay, very good. I think the overall, I guess what I come out is that we have to find, and while these incidents are numerous, it's not as if the library is causing these incidents. It is a result of where our society is. And, and I know that Bailey and the entire team is trying to figure out what role so many of our employees, many people, didn't know they were going to be mental health counselors or drug and alcohol counselors or, just all the things that we ask of our employees that were never part of their job description, and just wholesale rethinking how do we serve our community, especially in light of the library bond, is a really great opportunity. So I'll be excited to hear from our library team to hear some of their ideas about how we serve our community more humanely and more broadly. But I really thank you for doing this. I think I heard that it hasn't been done. The audit hasn't been done for 20 years. So it sounds like it was time for one to be done. And I think it was very in-depth and very revealing. And it sounds like there's already been good progress made by the library. So thank you for the audit.
Thank you. Commissioner Myron.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you in the auditor's office for diving deep. This is quite an amazing report, and I just appreciate your time and sort of your profound dedication to connecting with people to really understand what's going on. And I appreciated your time doing the individual briefing with me. And I think I mentioned to you, I think I've mentioned to colleagues that I've been engaged in a process myself of meeting with frontline library staff in all the library branches, and hope to do more of them, but I have visited the branches in my district, and that has been an incredible journey. And I want to emphasize my gratitude to the incredible staff who show up every day despite unprecedented challenges that we've heard about, just the tip of the iceberg today, constant change and fear for their own health and safety. I wanted to just read it. It's interesting, Commissioner Brim Edwards, you asked some great questions that I hope will be the basis of ongoing discussions of the board as we consider budgeting, future budget issues. And just reading, I look back on my notes I'm trying to compile them and I'll get them all together, but, just comments from people that I talked to in the libraries, security and the two big issues that came up were security and safety and labor. For security and safety, comments were that this is, and these were echoed, all branches, everyone I spoke with, emphatic nods whenever anyone would say anything about this. But the extreme level of stress, people say they're always on high alert. They're dealing with tons of intoxicated people. They're required to constantly judge and manage behavior. They're waking people up all day. Said the bathrooms are a huge issue. People are using them constantly to clean up or use drugs, and this is a big safety threat. One security officer described having to lock down because of fentanyl. Said people are all around the buildings all day. Staff have to regularly administer Narcan. One supervisor had a computer thrown at their face and had to go to the hospital. Said that they're expected to do the job of security, but they're not given access to information, security information that could help them do their job. One person expressed concerns with the new central library. It says, we'll have 20 bathrooms. Security is already overwhelmed with 2. What's the plan for that? Also, one employee, echoed by everyone else, said, I can guarantee you with the floor-to-ceiling stalls, which is supposedly designed to be trauma-informed and for privacy, we will find someone dead. And leaving after work, people describe violent incidents that are becoming more common. And in terms of labor, they talk about challenges and crossover of different job classifications, the lack of compensation, where library assistants make a good wage, but all of the job classifications now are basically all doing the same job, and they all should be paid commensurately. So COVID pay was raised. 2 employees were out when I visited on leave, but were uncovered. And there's tons of management turnover. One employee mentioned having 5 different supervisors in just the past year. So in thinking about change management, speaking with Veli, you and I kind of informally connected on it. And you mentioned there is a change management team. And I'd suggested, maybe we should, an external evaluation of sort of the change management practices, because the constant change was emphasized as a challenge for so many people. But ideas that individuals brought up that I think are worthy, really worthy, and there are so many more, but they love the pop-ups. Because since the Central Library is closed, I went to one of the pop-ups. They said they're great. A lot of the regulars from the Central Library would like the pop-up to remain even when the Central Library opens. As Commissioner Brim Edwards alluded to, acknowledge libraries are day centers. And 2 approaches to this are make real day centers where people can be, and offer some day center services at libraries and expand the space so you can meet people where they're at. Tech help, job help. They like the community resource counselors, other connectors to services, but not just library social workers. And they mentioned that there's 2 for the entire system. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's not even a drop in the bucket. More hygiene bags. And then a few people were like, quote, stop fixing it, unquote. There's constant change. Often it makes things worse, not to mention that the churn itself has a negative impact on employees. Take some time to adapt to the old new before going on to the new. And again, mentioning how can we open up more spaces for community to go to, especially as the weather gets bad. Libraries don't have the capacity, and it's not their function, but it's the only place people can be. It's like, there you go. It's kind of said it, echoed it all. And so just a couple of specific questions are, Are staff leaving their library jobs due to safety at work concerns? Because I was hearing that frequently. And so the staffing issues directly related to security issues, did that come out in your?
That's not something that came out that I would feel comfortable answering to.
Okay. And there were some, questions related to, wanting to use KSAs and improve the sort of representation and diversity in who is providing services at different libraries, but there was a lot of concern about how that was actually being implemented, like the idea, but the implementation. And so I'd love to have discussions further with library about that. And I think that was that something that you went into in the audit?
What we pointed out in the audit and what we certainly heard was kind of this level of frustration around, balancing out being available in the library to provide those cultural and language skills to patrons who are coming in, and also having community-focused work. And sometimes the opportunities for doing that work wouldn't always be consistent. And so if people could do the work, then there's an extra burden on workload, and is that fair? And then if they don't have the opportunities to do their work, are they really able to apply their skills?
There's that reported police slow response time to incidents at libraries. A lot of folks are really concerned about that. Are there efforts to, what kind of communication and relationship is there with police? I'm just curious.
I think that would be a better question for the library.
Now or later.
So we're going to have all the questions to the audit folks first, and then we'll bring up, because there were several people who had questions for the library.
Okay. And so I think most of my questions are actually then for the library. This was really, really a great audit, and thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the engagement that you had in looking at these issues and the way that you're bringing these things forward. And I know that there have been and will continue to be a lot of conversations in response to the audit. Just to appreciate all the work that went into this. And thank you so much for being here today to present to the board. All right. All right. And now I will invite Vayli and whomever you want to bring up from your team to help answer the questions that you had heard from the board.
Good morning. Good morning.
So I know that there were a couple of questions that had already been raised. I don't know if you have responses for those already, or if you want the commissioners to go ahead and repeat those questions.
I'll try to catch them, but I might miss a couple. I was indeed taking notes. Good morning. For the record, Vayli Elke, Director of Libraries. I'm joined by several of my colleagues. I'll have them introduce themselves.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Annie Lewis. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director at the library.
Kirby McCurtis, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Location Services.
Good morning. My name is Jen Studebaker, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the library's Community Services Director.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd just like to start by saying we welcome this audit and the recommendations. And I hope you had the opportunity to read the chair's response, in which we respond to each of the recommendations in a fair amount of detail. And for many of those, there's work already underway to address some of the issues raised in those audits. And in others, we were happy to see what the audit raised and are responding to those appropriately. So we are happy to work together to improve things for our employees. So there was a question about, oh my goodness. well, I can go backwards. Commissioner Myron, you asked about our relationship with PPB. We have so a reminder that I've been at the library for 25 years. I've worked in outreach. I've worked at Central as an administrator, as the director, as the deputy, and as the director. And all of that time, there were ongoing conversations, in particular when I was at Central Library with PPB, about that relationship and response. As I think you all are likely more aware than I, PPB appears to be stretched pretty thinly right now. And while our first direction to staff whenever there's an incident that needs immediate responses to phone 911, the reality is that it isn't always an immediate response. I don't know how many of you have phoned 911 yourselves. I have, and have been put on hold. And I think that's the reality right now. We do have ongoing communication with PPB, partly through Dorothy Elmore in the Workforce Security Department here at the county. And then we have direct relationships, for instance, in Gresham with the Gresham Police managers to the law enforcement. So we have a number of ways in which we're engaging with formal law enforcement. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Myron?
Yes. Yes. I mean, yeah, I mean, have you had a conversation maybe with the police chief?
Yes, we have, actually.
Okay, you personally have had.
Not since Commissioner Vega Peterson has been in her role, but with Commissioner Chair Kafori. We met several times with the chief of police, and I believe that there have been conversations with PPB directly and indirectly. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think your meeting with the new police chief might be a good.
Yeah,
might be great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a great suggestion, Commissioner.
But yeah, I think that answered.
Great, thank you. Let's see, the next question. The KSA implementation, Commissioner, you asked about that. I'm going to actually ask Deputy Director Annie Lewis to respond to that. We've been actually doing a lot of work around that. Just for context, literally for years, we've been looking at how we create a more authentic and genuine engagement with the people in our community who are furthest from opportunity, and in particular, communities of color. And the KSA designation for positions has been one way for us to address that. You saw the numbers of staff we have now at the library, which I believe is the highest percentage of KSA employees in the county, and that will continue to grow. So we haven't been as intentional as we could be around ascertaining how we are really strategic about how we deploy those positions, Commissioner, and you and I talked about that, and that is work that is currently underway. So I'll hand it over to Annie to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. As Caroline mentioned in the audit report, staff with language and cultural KSAs work across our library system in public services, which includes location services, so in our neighborhood libraries, but also in addition work in our community services teams, teams that provide outreach, deliver library services out in the community, and conduct community engagement, and staff also in our integrated services team who select our library materials. And so staff in those roles, or staff with a language or cultural KSA, work in a variety of positions and classifications with varying job scope and responsibility. Some of those positions have a greater percentage of focus on providing services out in the community and doing community engagement. Some of those positions have a greater focus on direct customer service delivery within our library locations. When staff are hired into those roles, one of the things the audit report highlights is that there could be more clarity and direction for staff in those roles for them to understand from the outset, like, how will I be connecting with the community that I was hired to serve and connect with directly? Staff are, of course, hired to serve and connect with the entire community, but staff with a language or cultural KSA skill provide specific services and are specifically engaging with a particular community. And so we are at this point launching a process which we're calling an assessment of the language and cultural KSA program to broadly look at the program because it's been in existence. We've had language and cultural KSAs for I think over 20 years, but haven't really taken a deep look at the program and how we effectively support staff in their roles, ensure that there's clear expectations, ensure that that those positions are really effectively able to provide the services to the communities effectively. So the Language and Cultural KSA assessment is just launching right now, and we actually are going to be hiring a limited duration position to be able to coordinate that process. That process will include deep engagement with library staff to really understand their experiences. In addition to, though, also broadly looking at the data the library currently uses, and could use to better inform how we assign language and cultural KSAs to specific positions, in addition to how we make decisions about which service languages we will have at the library. So right now our service languages include Spanish, Russian, Vietnamese, Chinese, and we also have staff with a Somali KSA, and in addition to English. And we really want to take a look at how we're making those decisions, and are we doing that in a way that really advances equity in the community. So that assessment is launching. We're hiring a limited duration position. We anticipate that work will happen over the next year, and that work will also intersect with another effort, which there were questions about, which is our future staffing initiative, which I can speak to separately from the language and cultural KSA assessment. But we're excited to do this work because we know that staff in their positions have expressed concern. That's impacting morale. It's impacting their experience in the work environment. And so we're really actively working to address those concerns.
Thank you, Annie.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I just on that, that sounds, it's great that assessment is happening. I think I'm curious how that is being communicated to staff and how staff are giving feedback into what even the assessment process should entail. And I think what I heard from so many people was around the standardization of what even constitutes, a KSA, clarification of roles, responsibilities, also matching background to the community. Like there's some that are KSAs in certain cultures or backgrounds, and they're in a community that has an entirely different culture and background, and they're like that. This is not using me to the best of my capacity. It's not serving that community that needs someone. Just to speak to Hillsdale specifically, I don't think there's a single, there may be one. I don't think there's any African American or Black individuals serving at the library in Hillsdale, which is a predominant, there is a huge population of, there's Somali, Ethiopian in the community, and same with Capitol Hill. I think there may be one or two individuals, and making sure that is just all happening throughout the county and including the West Side. Just put that
Absolutely.
out there.
and one of the pieces of the language and cultural KSA assessment includes really revising the plan for which language and cultural KSAs are assigned to positions in each of our library locations. So that's part of that effort, and to refresh, renew, and to look at the data that we use to help inform that, right? So we do anticipate, and one of the recommendations in the audit is that we provide that plan by October 2024, which we intend to do. So.
Great. And the one other thing in that is just noting that some staff a number of people said they use their language or cultural skills, but they're not compensated for that. And so I'm not sure how that's taken into account in their roles, but to include that as part of the broader conversation as well, because that's a problem. So,
Okay, thank you. And I know Commissioner Beeson has some questions, so we'll just go on the line
Great.
here. Thank you.
Thank you all. Two quick questions. I'm wondering how, it's SEPTED, like how are we incorporating safety things in as we renovate and build new buildings? I'm assuming that those things have.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, each of the major projects, we've brought in a safety and security consultant to review those designs. And in the response letter from the chair, you'll note that we identified some of the actual very discrete changes that we're making in building design directly in response to security, adding cameras, lower shelving, which does a remarkable job of helping us manage space and is a best practice across the country in libraries. And also, more broadly, how we are thinking about spaces where people can, quiet spaces, where people can go if they just need to be away from the cacophony that is often a library building, and how we're dividing up spaces in ways that are responsive to the varying ways that people behave and are going to be in libraries. But we're definitely using the expertise of security consultants to ensure that we're designing those spaces as best we can with those things in mind.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Continue on with the question about security. How do you all determine where you have security, which sites, and are any of the guards armed? And then generally, how is a community response to security?
So I'm going to ask Kirby McCurtis, who oversees security for the library, to address that. I will say that none of our officers are armed.
So we have a combination of, we look at the number of incidents per year and the type of incidents to decide if there's going to be security there. We don't have any armed guards or anything like that, and most of our locations have some sort of security presence. Right now it's a mix of contract security and in-house security. What was your other part of your question? I missed it.
I think you've got that.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
And I will also say that that model has evolved and will continue to evolve. It is a constant evolution in terms of what the resources are that are available, how much we're prioritizing the experiences of the most marginalized in our community in terms of how they experience security at our libraries, and how what Kirby described, numbers of incidents, types of incidents, all of those sorts of things. We went from having only 2 facility security officers at Central Library when I started here, to now we have numerous private security that the county contracts with, to in-house security people, to people in charge that play a role in security. It's a much more robust infrastructure, and we will continue to look at that and analyze it. And one of the recommendations from the audit is that we do a better job of analyzing data. That will be part of how we determine what that security looks like. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Brim-Edwards.
Thank you. So my questions were in the recommendations around, there's a set of recommendations that would be implemented by October 1st. And they're about specifically security, the staffing for security, and social work personnel, coverage on evenings and weekends, adapting the person in charge model to meet union agreements, and then staffing for the neighborhood libraries so that they can stay open. My question had been, is that something that's going to be implemented before October 1st? I know when I toured the libraries under construction in District 3 that there are design elements that are being put in place that should help with security, but I'm curious about the staffing piece. When I looked at the management response, it was more focused on meeting at least the response on the staffing, meeting the community needs versus the sort of security aspect that many employees had discussed. And I don't know if, so like the last part of my question is, I don't know if that's actually a library or some other part of the county function that supports the libraries.
Yeah, I will say that we've really welcomed the creation of the workforce security unit at the county. That's been a very helpful resource for us, and I imagine as that builds out and develops, it will be an even more critical resource for us. It has been the case that the library has been sort of on its own for years to figure out security, and in some ways, I think that made sense in that, you know, public libraries are arguably the most public space we have in any community. So everything, you know, I was speaking to someone last night, everything that happens on the streets of our community typically happens in our buildings. And so that makes it complex. We definitely will continue to look at what the staffing, specifically the staffing needs are, but we look at it in a much more sort of holistic way. Uniformed officers, discrete security personnel, definitely a big part. We've increased our costs, what we've shifted toward paying for formal security by 70% since 2019. That's 4 years. So that's a significant investment and will continue to be a significant investment. But a couple of you mentioned social workers. They're a piece of that for us. The library invests in social workers. We just expanded their contract to have coverage across all hours. We could use more of those, but you know, what I need to remind all of us is that if we choose to direct resources toward that, it means we're not directing resources towards something else. And those are trade-offs we choose to make. We've looked at the possibility of peer navigators. Other organizations in the county have used those. That's also a decision around resource allocation, but has been proven effective in other organizations and in other libraries, something we want to definitely consider.
I would just add about the staffing. The person in charge model is something that came up a lot during the audit. And so we worked with Local 88 to come to an agreement that staff can opt into service person in charge. That will be implemented by March 1st. So we're in the process of doing that. So staff can decide if they'd like to have that role. So I think that was covered in the audit too.
And that's immediate. I mean, essentially immediate. It took us some time to negotiate that with Local 88, but we came to agreement. It was a good conversation. And those positions get a 15% premium, which is an increase from the 10% they've gotten for as long as I can recall. And it's now an opt-in or opt-out.
I want to add also in regard to staffing, you asked what we're doing more immediately in regard to staffing. So one of the things with the library building projects is that we have a number of buildings closed. And so we have to balance sort of when we fill vacancies, because with so many buildings closed, we don't want to fill all of those vacancies because we reassign staff from closed buildings to other buildings or to provide outreach services. And so it's a delicate dance, right? The timing of how you when to fill vacancies in order to have sufficient staffing for our buildings. And so we're very much actively, in fact, we just are very actively hiring right now because we anticipate with the Central Library coming open later this winter, that the staff who are currently reassigned from Central will go back to Central. And so we have an executive staffing team that actively looks at our staffing vacancies and makes decisions about how and when to fill those vacancies. So it's a very, very active process. And the other component, so that's happening, of course, immediately. But we also have a future staffing initiative that is well underway, and in fact it really started back in 2019, with really looking at our staffing model and what we need for the future. And so I've had the chance to brief almost all of you, not Commissioner Beeson yet, but on a transition that we're doing around eliminating classification in order to transition to a model with library assistants, access services assistants. So that's one piece of that future staffing initiative. The other major piece is we're right now in the middle of a request for intermediate proposals to contract with an external consultant to work with us on developing that future staffing plan that is in the audit recommendations to be presented by October 2024. And that plan really looks ahead to the opening of the East County Library, which will have the most significant impact on our staffing overall in our system. And so we're excited excited about that work. It's been underway. We've been making a lot of progress in different areas of staffing over the last several years, but that's the next step. And so we anticipate having that contract in place by January, and that work will continue over 2025 or 24 with that final plan ready for October 2024 to implement so that we're prepared for the East County Library opening. So.
Great, that's super helpful. And as part of that, sort of thinking about the staffing for the neighborhood libraries that are going to open, and I'm specifically focused on the ones in District 3 and Midland, Belmont, and Holgate. I'm looking at the chart in the auditor's report that looks at overall incidents, and clearly Central Library is a location where there is a lot of incidents, but not far behind, and sort of up at the top, in that sort of top tier are Midland, Belmont, and Holgate. And I'm interested in knowing, as you're thinking about the staffing for those libraries when they reopen, which we're super excited about, is security staffing like part of that overall staffing, that planning that's going to be done?
Yeah, so Midland already has security. They had it before they closed, and they'll continue to have it after when they reopen. So will Holgate and Belmont. Belmont has our in-house library safety liaison, but definitely that's a priority at all of the locations. Midland, Holgate, and Belmont are probably the next tier in terms of after Central.
And I'll add, Commissioner, that with the implementation of the opt-in person in charge model, we'll be looking at that implementation very closely, because as the auditors mentioned, we rely on people to serve as a person in charge for maintaining access to our buildings. So we're going to be assessing that, and in our FY25 budget proposal, addressing any needs or gaps that we anticipate if we see a fluctuation in numbers, particularly in those libraries, especially Holgate, with a significant expansion. That we'll be looking at the staffing levels closely to ensure that we're adequately staffed for the opening of that location, in addition to the others.
Great. And then my last question is, and I appreciate all the responses. My last question is, there a need for, again, looking at the county having made recently investments in day centers as being a place where people could go as an alternative to the library? So yes, we expect people still to go to the libraries because all the various important services that are offered, but the day center should be for other services that aren't perhaps library-related services. I'm curious if there are, other than what's outlined in the audit, if there's other tools or new policy guidance that the library needs. So it wouldn't be a staffing thing, but different policy guidance based on the just increase in incidences and what's happening in the libraries?
Yeah, I think, I've had many conversations with the chair and her staff and others about that balance of the library serving what is becoming an increasingly important role in this community as a place that is free and open and doesn't judge people based on their appearance or their resources in terms of access, and the reality of a lot of the behavior that we're seeing in our spaces as a result of being so open. I hope that libraries are always a place where people can feel like they're welcome, no matter who they are. It would make me sad if that weren't the case. That said, we are limited in terms of what will never be. Public libraries will never be the equivalent of, a behavioral health resource center, unless we're staffed with people with medical expertise, behavioral health expertise. I mean, those things don't exist at a public library. So I think being realistic about what they can provide is important. And then I think those partnerships are really important in terms of understanding what gaps the library can fill and what need to be filled by other resources.
Thank you. I don't know if you have questions, but that's fine. Okay, I want to make sure that Commissioner Stegman has time to ask
Thank you,
questions. Chair. And any I know the library would be happy.
I'm happy to follow up. Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. I did have a couple of questions, and I apologize, Chair, but I haven't seen the letter, the response to the audit, so maybe...
It's always, so for everybody knows, when an audit is published, the response letter is always at the very end of the audit.
Oh, okay, it is, great, okay, thank you. So I did just have a general question, Bailey, about the workplace violence prevention plan. You mentioned the workforce security unit added. I guess it's just not like super clear to me, like what is that plan? Where is it? What does it contain?
Yeah, so we're really looking to the expertise of the workforce security folks to help us conduct those kinds of analyses. We're not security experts. Right. We've become much more informed over the years, but we're looking to the expertise of workforce security to conduct analyses of each of our locations. And my understanding is that they have a procedure for how that's done in terms of, what factors to consider, what are the potential changes that need to happen. And those are the sorts of things that we welcome, in terms of how we think through our spaces and ensuring that they're as safe as they can be.
Okay, so that's forthcoming.
Yep.
Okay.
There's some that's underway by our security manager, and that person will be working with workforce security to really nail that down in a way.
Yeah, workplace security provided the template and sort of a series of questions as he's going through the assessment. But yeah, they provided a whole folder for him.
Okay, and so I would assume that the board will get a briefing once that plan is developed?
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
Okay,
definitely. And I would welcome, again, having the expertise of workforce security to help us with that presentation.
Great. Yep. All right. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, and I think it was kind of asked, but concerned about employees leaving the library because of workplace violence. Do we know from an HR point of view, statistically, how big of an issue or challenge that is?
To my knowledge, that it hasn't risen and we don't have a lot of turnover at the library. Janet, you want to address that?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Janet Easter, she, her pronouns. I'm the library's HR director. And I heard you ask the question to the auditors. And when I looked at the data, the turnover or staff leaving wasn't really about safety or security concerns. It was more about like staff getting different jobs, just leaving because they had, going to school. Some staff have relocated to other locations in the country. So it really wasn't about safety and security. But I also know that sometimes staff don't tell you everything when they're leaving. They may not share the ultimate reason why they're leaving. So, but that hasn't been, I've done some exit interviews with staff, and their reason for leaving has not been safety and security, but that's what I know.
And we only, exactly, and I think we only know what is reported to us.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Jenna, I appreciate
question.
that. Yeah, I think, Bailey, and I know we've had lots of conversations, and you stated that, libraries aren't necessarily a place where you have behavioral health services. And I think that's kind of the tension that maybe we're saying that maybe they should be. I mean, I think about, do you work with like Project Respond and so?
Yeah. And we've had many conversations with folks at DCHS and behavioral health. Yep.
I'm just thinking that, unfortunately, things have changed. The world has changed. And if we don't meet people where they are, then we're failing. And so the model of what we historically think about what a library is, in a lot of ways has been really good and positive, but it's also just, I think about the Compass Project of, trying to serve people to help with their, their records and things like that I just think we have to be more human-centered. Like, people are coming, instead of us being so reactive, why don't we be a place where people can go to get resources so that they're not in a state of crisis? And then we all have to just deal with whatever that crisis is. And I don't know how you do that, but I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, and and I'll ask Jen to talk. I will say that has been one of the great learnings from having social workers in our buildings, is because what those people provide is exactly what you're describing. And we know for a fact that people in this community, once they're aware of those resources in the library, one of the advantages of a public library is it's exceptionally low barrier access. Mm-hmm. People feel respected. They don't have to belong to some certain group in order to access it. So if there's a resource there that is going to be helpful, I think people tend to look to the libraries for those sorts of things. And, we continue to figure out how we amplify that. I think you can't overestimate the impact of having larger and different kinds of spaces will have in terms of making those kinds of resources available. We're already in conversation with the DA's office. They're providing some support at our tiny little St. John's library for people in the community who need to access those resources. And that's the kind of thing, once we have bigger, more diverse spaces, we'll be able to do more and more of. And Jen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I agree with you. It's incredibly important for the library to help our community members navigate the resources in our community, both in the library and outside of the library. And one of the things that we're already doing to support that is we hired a partnerships manager who is someone who has expertise in helping us as an organization navigate that, both internal partnerships within the county, like you highlighted the Compass Centers and things like that, and then also within the community. And so I think that will be a big shift for us moving forward with our larger spaces, is just having the ability and opportunity to really bring in the other resources in the community to have closer access to our library patrons.
Thank you for sharing that, Jen. I really love the idea of having a partnership with our other departments who have expertise in these areas. So I'll stop there, but just want to appreciate that it is really challenging, and that I recognize there's no, wand that we can wave just to make libraries as safe as we would like them to be. And it's really hard to figure out, what is the way to operate best in a public space where we want all people to feel welcome. So I know that's there's a lot of tension between those areas, and just want to appreciate the efforts that you're making to recognize that and to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And you all know this, and I've said this, and I said this to Commissioner Myron the last time we spoke, it is an incredibly difficult time to work in public service. It really is. I have friends who own restaurants and their staff are struggling. I think the reality is it's a really hard time to work in public service.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming up to answer all the questions. I want to thank the auditor staff again. Thank you so much for your good work on this. I did want to provide just a little bit of context, though, because since we've been really focused on the library today, library employee turnover is at 9.2%. Countywide, it's at 10.8%. So just to give some context of when we're talking about the library versus what's happening across the county, just to provide that, because we are really focused, as we should be, for the topic today on the library, but just to give the broader picture too. So look forward to continuing to work with you and implementing the recommendations, and especially as we start looking at the next year's budget and how we can put some of these things into action. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be come back on Thursday. We're going to have library back for one of the items on Thursday as well. So we will have more of you, lots of library this week. We'll see you all on Thursday. With that, we are adjourned.